cryogenic methane, which is the methane that these cattle are.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here in this conference. As a guest, we have Diana Rodgers. She's a registered nutritionist of real food, committed with sustainability. She lives close to Boston, Massachusetts, and she has her clinical practice. And in the Sustainable Dish Instagram, she promotes her ideals. She is in favor of animal welfare, and she's also a leader of the Global Food Justice Alliance, and she gives talks on optimal human health, regenerative agriculture. She's the co-author of The Sacred Cow and also the director of the film with the same name. She also is promoting the initiative of Global Food Justice Alliance to promote equitable food justice in the world. Today she will be presenting her speech. So thank you for participating in this conference, and for all of you who are also listening to us through the streaming, and also to all the colleagues and authorities, the Minister of Livestock and Agriculture, and all the institutes that are participating, and the private sector as well. And of course to INAC, who is the organizer of the event. So with no further ado, I will give the floor to Diana.
Honored to have so many of you here today. I want to thank INAC for hosting me. And a little bit about what I do. Some of my slides have been translated into Spanish, but I talk about the intersection between optimal health, the perfect diet, and sustainable agriculture. Some of the work that I've done, as was mentioned, I wrote the book Sacred Cow, also the film Sacred Cow. The book I hear may be translated into Spanish soon. I have an influencing brand for social media called Sustainable Dish, and my nonprofit, the Global Food Justice Alliance. And I also speak internationally about these issues. Last year, I visited 10 countries, and this is a photo of me at COP27 in Egypt, defending the importance of meat and livestock to the global food system. This was a conference that was dominated by the oil industry and the alt meat industry, and there were very few of us who were defending livestock. I started my nonprofit because I truly believe that all people deserve access to nutrient-dense food because it is uniquely nutritious. Fake meat, lab meat does not contribute to food sovereignty, and the forced restriction is cultural and moral imperialism. So what I do, I educate especially kids and young adults. I help improve access to meat for food insecure populations. I work with the meat industry to help make meat more sustainable. And I work with policymakers and the media to try to dispel the common myths around meat and livestock. And so, as you probably know, meat is the target right now, unfairly. It is a trifecta of evil. It is bad for your health, it is bad for the environment, and it is wrong to kill beautiful animals, right? And so this is my job every day. I try to explain meat won't cause cancer, and then I hear greenhouse gases are worse than transportation, and I try to explain that, and then the cows take up too much land. And then I try to explain that that's not true, and then people will say, oh, but it's wrong to kill animals, and you should just eat plants. And so I'm constantly fighting multiple narratives. These are the most common questions of the years that I've been trying to educate people about meat. We have these ones, okay? Does meat cause cancer? Does meat cause heart disease? Can I just eat plants? Don't cattle use too much water? Aren't they inefficient with feed? Don't they use too much land? Aren't they the main driver of climate change? Isn't it unethical to eat meat? And shouldn't we all eat less meat? And I should mention, I forgot to mention earlier that I have a background as a livestock producer. I raised sheep for 18 years on pasture, and I got into this because I suffered from malnutrition as a child. I didn't find out until my 20s that I had celiac disease. And so I'm very, very passionate about livestock practices and about good nutrition, especially for children. So people are confused, and there was a study done in America that looked at why are people leaving meat. We have two types of people. We have the rejectors, these are the vegans. They are doing this because of animal welfare reasons. It's wrong to kill a beautiful animal for you to eat. But the good news is 85% of these people go back to eating meat in only 3 months. And they become my biggest fans. The more common and the most problematic, because there's so many of them, are the reducers, flexitarians, people who think that I should just eat less meat. And they are doing this because they think that meat is too expensive, even though I prove that it is not, and that they think it is unhealthy. So I believe in letting people know about the nutritional importance of meat is actually the best way that you can get flexitarians, reducers, to go back to eating more meat, because meat alternatives are not healthier. The main person that I am talking to when I do my influencing are young women in their 20s and 30s. Maybe they just had some children, they are educated, they are concerned about the environment, and they're trying to do the right thing. They hear the wrong message from the media, and they're eating less meat because they think that they're being a better citizen, a better global citizen. And unfortunately, we are inundated with messages from the press and from policymakers who are influenced by what I call carbon tunnel vision. There are so many other factors that contribute to a sustainable food system, much more than just carbon emissions. We have water cycles, soil health, biodiversity, equality, carbon cycling. All of these are critical to whether or not a food is important and sustainable. But the narrative right now is only looking at emissions, and I think this is very wrong and dangerous. And of course, the people who are pushing this narrative, the carbon emissions, the oil companies, and the fake meat companies. Because nature works in systems. This is a very simple concept. Children understand this. Many years ago, I used to teach art. I can draw much better than this. But I drew this simply because children understand this. Cattle can convert food we cannot eat on land we cannot crop into the most nutritious food for humans using minimal inputs with the sun and rain. They can increase biodiversity above and underground and sequester carbon. These are some of the messages that we're being told by a campaign called Meatless Monday, which has taken over many school systems in the United States and around the world. They're saying that livestock production is more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. Decrease your chance of getting diabetes by 15%. All you need to do is eat more beans and less meat. Save your kidneys by just eating plants instead of meat. So not only is Meatless Mondays pulling meat away from children in schools, but it's also the propaganda that I have the biggest problem with, because these young children are then going home to their parents, and when their parents serve meat, these kids are saying, don't you know that cattle are driving climate change, that meat is unhealthy? And all of these pieces of propaganda I have an answer to in my presentation. We're also hearing this from the media. This is Vox News, which is very common among young adults in the US and in Europe. And this one really bothers me. It says, Americans eat more meat than almost anyone else in the world, roughly 174 animals per person per year. And then you see the breakdown, and 137 of those animals are shrimp. So I looked up the code for ethical journalism, and I found out that this is actually a violation of ethical journalism. And so through my nonprofit, I called them out. This is one of the codes of ethics. They must take special care not to misrepresent or oversimplify in promoting or summarizing a story. So this is a direct violation of that. I've also seen this with the New York Times, is very bad against meat, and The Economist. Mayor Adams of New York City is, in particular, a villain to me, because not only is there meatless Mondays in New York City schools, there is now vegan Fridays. In New York City, 70% of the students are low income, 10% are homeless. There's never been any evidence showing that taking meat away from growing children will result in healthier children. And so these kids are now going home on the weekends to food insecure homes and going to school on Fridays and Mondays with no meat. This will further disadvantage these children. These are pictures of vegan Fridays. These are actual pictures. We have these ultra-processed burritos, banana, and chips. Okay. Sorry, I'm distracted. So if the message to these children is meat is bad, what will they choose? We know that children are very picky. It's not like these children in New York are going to go buy an expensive kale salad with chickpeas and take iron supplements and B12 pills. They're just going to go to the store and get a sandwich with no meat on it, so just plain bread, right? So it's a very dangerous message. It's not rooted in scientific evidence, and it's elitist. And so my point is that being vegan is a privilege. And it's very easy to be a vegan if you live in Los Angeles or New York and you have access to a lot of money and all of the imported vegetables and supplements and time to cook everything. But for the average person, it is not accessible. And so it's fine if someone wants to be vegan for themselves, if they don't want to eat meat, it's okay. But they cannot make policies that pull meat away from poor children. PETA is the, I'm trying to remember, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And they have a new initiative now in Africa. This is a child from Uganda. And he just received an award because he has pledged not to eat meat. PETA is now going into African schools and teaching kids that it's wrong to eat meat. We only have one randomized control trial looking at meat versus less meat in school children. Only one good study. And it showed that the kids who got the meat snack at school did better academically, behaviorally, and physically. This is the only study we have. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the rates of malnutrition globally. We have 1 in 2 preschool age children are impacted by at least one micronutrient deficiency, 2 in 3 women. And in many countries, it's 9 in 10 women suffering from at least one micronutrient deficiency. And this is not only a problem in low and middle income countries, this is also a problem in the US and the UK. We have 1 in 2 women in the UK, 1 in 3 women in the US suffering from a micronutrient deficiency. The most common is iron deficiency. And of all of the leading nutrient deficiencies worldwide, the best solution is eating animal-sourced foods, meat. Here's a quick snapshot of Uruguay. So overweight and obesity is the main issue for children. This is also considered a form of malnutrition because you can overeat calories but not get the right nutrition. 54% of children from Uruguay consume too many calories. Almost 30% of these calories are coming from ultra-processed foods. 27% of teenagers and 35% of adults are obese. This is similar to US numbers. 27% of children have anemia. This is iron deficiency that results in poor brain development. So this is going to affect their scores in school and their ability to be productive citizens. 15% of pregnant women have anemia. This impacts their babies. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about health because I'd like to sort of organize the arguments: health, environment, and nutrition. Health, environment, and ethics. Okay, so does meat cause cancer? Can I just eat plants? And aren't we just eating too much meat? Okay, so you may have heard a report from the WHO that eating bacon is as bad as smoking cigarettes. Okay? But the problem is they're not telling you the relative risk of this. They're not telling you that your chance of getting cancer from smoking is 30 times higher. Your chance of getting cancer from eating 5 pieces of bacon every day from the whole rest of your life doesn't even double your chances. So smoking's 30 times, bacon is much, much less than that. And here's an example of this. So your chance of getting colon cancer in the general public is about 5.5%. All of us have about that risk. Eating 5 pieces of bacon every day for your whole life increases your chance of getting colon cancer from 5.5% to 6.5%. A very small amount. That's an 18% increase, and that's what the media reports, right? 18% increase. And that sounds very dramatic, but it's really statistically insignificant. And probably in the context of a healthy diet with lots of fruits and vegetables and a healthy lifestyle, it's not a problem at all. But the media likes clicks, and so they report 20% increase of cancer from eating bacon. It's the worst. We also have a problem of diet recall studies. So nutrition research is often based on, what did you eat last month? What did you eat 3 months ago? And people are likely to remember they may have had a burger, but they're much more likely to forget all the things they ate with that burger: the soda, the fries, the desserts that they had. They're much less likely to report smoking and drinking. And so there's been studies on these, and people lie on these reports. But this is how observational research is collected. So you have to be very skeptical when you read these association studies, because just because one thing is associated with something else, it doesn't mean it causes that. Okay, causation is not, correlation is not causation. This is an example of that. So if you look at the per capita cheese consumption, that is directly correlated with the number of people who die becoming tangled in their bed sheets. But of course, cheese does not cause people to get tangled in their bed sheets and die, right? People who eat meat also tend to have other lifestyle factors that vegetarians don't have. Your typical vegetarian is less likely to smoke and drink. They're more likely to exercise more often. And so all of those lifestyle factors need to be adjusted for when we're looking at the science. I was sent some images of typical meals here in your country. These are beautiful. It is not the meat that is causing the problem. It's everything else we eat with the meat that is causing the problem. So the burger is actually the best thing for your health on this, and maybe if that was real cheese, maybe the cheese too. They did do a study where they looked at people who shop at health food stores, which kind of adjusts for lifestyle factors. People who shop at health food stores in general have healthier lifestyles, and they looked at omnivores versus vegetarians, and they found the same, no difference at all. They found that vegans lived less, but vegetarians and omnivores were about the same. Okay, so if meat is not that bad for you, maybe we just need to eat less meat, right? And oh my gosh, Uruguay eats the most meat in the world. So maybe we all need to eat less meat just in Uruguay, right? So here in my country, in the US, you can see the meat is the red at the bottom. And since 1970, our red meat consumption has actually gone down. We're eating much more chicken, oils, processed vegetable oils, grains, and that's not whole grains, that's processed food, and sugar. Here's what we have here in Uruguay. You can see that beef production is the blue. It's actually going down a little bit. And the chicken production is green, and that's actually slowly creeping up. But I have to tell you, because I know you probably think maybe, or some of you might be thinking chicken is healthier than beef. Beef is 20% to 30% more nutritious than chicken, and it tastes a lot better. But the really big problem we have in Uruguay is ultra-processed food consumption, in particular soda consumption. When you drink your calories from soda, your brain does not recognize those as food, and you're just going to eat the same amount all day long or more. So this is the main problem. It has nothing to do with meat at all. It has to do with ultra-processed foods, and in particular, soda. And when I look at the fake meats, I like to list all of the ingredients because this is an ultra-processed food too. They are not even close to as healthy as just eating real meat. And when we look at lab meat, which claims that it's going to be healthier or more sustainable or more ethical, absolutely not. So these are just this is a snapshot of some of the realities of vegan diets. It's not sustainable, as I mentioned. Most give up being a vegan after 3 months. B12 deficiency, which causes permanent brain damage in children. It's a nutrient you can only get in meat, is much higher in pregnant women, children, even when they take the supplements, because the supplements are not the same as eating the real food. There's a much higher chance of breaking bones. Vegan children, in particular, have low vitamin D and vitamin A. Vegans and vegetarians are much more likely to have depression because of B12. B12 is the precursor to serotonin. And low meat intake impacts IQ. It's approximately 15 points lower when you don't eat meat. They looked at what might happen in the United States if we eliminated all livestock from our food system. And what they found was that we would have more nutrient deficiencies, calcium, vitamin A, and B12, and essential fatty acids. We would also have an increase in calories and carbohydrates, and those are things we do not need more of in the United States food system. And they also found that the greenhouse gas emissions would only go down 2.6%. So it's not worth the nutritional risk. These are the types of things that are not discussed at the UN climate change talks. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the environmental reasons why we need cattle and other grazing animals in our food system. And these are the common questions that I see. They take up too much land, they drink too much water, we should just eat that food directly, it's inefficient to feed it to animals, and of course their emissions are driving climate change. Luckily, this one is in Spanish. So of all the agricultural land worldwide, 60% of that cannot be cropped, and it must be grazed. We have to have grazing animals, especially on grasslands, in order for them to be healthy. This is the biggest thing that people don't understand when they're saying, oh, but you can have on 1 hectare, you can have 2 tons of potatoes and only 1 cow. But it's not the same. It's not an equal comparison. And there's a big difference between a system that is integrated and working with nature versus an extractive system like cropping that works against nature. They looked at a study at the economic benefits to grazing livestock on public land in the US, and what they found was the ecosystem services per cow, per kilogram of retail beef were estimated at over $1,000 US per animal and $2.74 per kilogram of beef. These are the services that the animals are providing. This would be a really great study to do here in Uruguay. Globally, when you look at all of livestock, 86% of what livestock are consuming is inedible by humans. And this is also really important when I go and talk in a lot of other countries that are saying it's just wrong to have livestock. We should all be eating fake burgers made from crops. It's not that simple. People need to understand that livestock can actually convert food we can't eat into protein. Water. The majority of the water footprint attributed to beef is the moisture already in the grass. It's not the same as drinking water. So drinking water is irrigation. That's considered blue water. Green water is the natural water that's already in our ecosystems, whether or not that animal is grazing or not. And the majority of the water footprint, the majority of the water ingested by the animal is actually through the grasses that they're already eating. So, but that's not what you're going to hear from Meatless Mondays. This is what the children are seeing in the schools. Your quarter-pound burger is 10 bathtubs of water. Or it takes enough water for 1,700 thirsty people for a quarter-pound burger. That's complete misinformation. And nobody else is pushing back against that. Nobody. When I talk about greenhouse gases, this is also something that gets misunderstood quite frequently because the methane from cattle is part of a natural biogenic cycle. It's very different than the greenhouse gases coming from fossil fuels, which are extracting ancient carbon and methane and pulling it right into the atmosphere. And I have an animation for this that's subtitled in Spanish.
Biogenic methane, which is the methane that these cattle are putting up in the atmosphere, is part of a natural biological cycle. The methane goes up, it has a half-life of roughly 10 years. That methane is broken down into CO2 and water. Well, that water is a functioning component of water vapor that is a cycle that creates rain, and the CO2 is taken up by plants for photosynthesis. Even though this methane is going up in the air, we're also building carbon below ground. It's offsetting the methane that's going up anyway. It's a natural biogenic cycle. However, when we talk about fossil fuels, bringing up deep carbon and methane from well below the topsoil down into the Earth's crust, that's a completely different entity. And that is carbon that's ancient, that's coming from deep below ground and being put in the atmosphere and is in imbalance from a natural biological cycle.
Okay, that was a little clip from my film Sacred Cow. I'm almost done. I wanted to mention there was this great study by Pablo Manzano, a Spanish researcher who looked at wild grazers and pastoralists in the Serengeti. And what he found was that wildebeests, which I don't know if you have a Spanish translation for that animal. It's like a wild boar. But they emit just as much, if not more, methane than cattle, and that the services the cattle are providing are an equal substitute for the wild animals. So we don't need to be rewilding everywhere. We can actually use cattle to perform the same ecosystem functions to increase biodiversity as the rewilders, who happen to be some of my biggest critics, because we want the same thing, but we have completely different ways of reaching that. So, we can keep the livelihoods of rural communities and provide food for humans using animals in a natural way, very similar to the wild grazing animals. Oh. Oh. Okay, I don't know. Oh, a little glitch here. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, the other slide just showed that people complain that meat is too expensive, and I went to Walmart.com, so online Walmart, which is the biggest retailer of grass-fed beef in the U.S., and I compared it to strawberries, to cookies, to chocolate. I looked at Starbucks drinks, and organic grass-fed beef was less expensive per pound than all of those foods. I think people are comparing beef to bread and saying, oh, I need to buy the bread because the beef is too expensive. Here we go. These were vegan protein powders per pound are more expensive. People are not complaining too much that the Starbucks macchiato, whatever drink, is too expensive, right? People are not outraged in the streets about that, but they're complaining that meat is too expensive. It is not too expensive. Per pound, it is a wonderful way to get really great nutrition, especially for women and children. Okay, so I'm winding down a little bit now, and I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I have seen around the world with this idea of carbon tunnel vision and how it is impacting policies around the world. So in Wales and in other countries, farmers are taking productive land, grazing land, out of food production and planting monocrop non-native trees. And they have to leave these trees planted in order to offset the carbon emissions. You may have heard that Ireland is looking to cull over 1 million cattle in order to offset their carbon emissions. This is not going to do anything to reduce demand for dairy and for meat. This is only going to put Irish farmers out of business and give more business to other countries. And it's going to really destroy the rural communities, and that's something that a lot of people are not factoring in. New Zealand is now taxing farmers for their greenhouse gas emissions from the cow burps. New Zealand is a good example of a country that's almost entirely pasture-based. Okay, and my friend Mayor Adams in New York City has a new program. He has partnered with American Express, and he is going to be tracking food consumption emissions of New York City residents and encouraging them to eat less dairy and meat. People are going to get a carbon score on their credit card bill, and he has pledged to reduce the carbon emission footprint of New York citizens by 33%. London is also joining in, but they're not as focused only on beef and dairy. London is doing clothing and other things as well, but it's still very, very dangerous because, of course, meat has, when you're just looking at carbon emissions, you're not factoring in sequestration and all the other benefits. Beef can look very bad. So it is critical that we need to make sure that policymakers around the world understand that cattle are not just a burping liability. So please resist the anti-meat messaging. What I've seen here in Uruguay is a beautiful system. The meat is amazing, and your grazing practices are wonderful. In general, I want to talk about how meat is sustainable nutrition. These are the main messages. Meat is a healthy and traditional food. Removing it can result in serious nutrient deficiencies. There is zero scientific evidence that reducing meat will improve human health. The shift to processed meat means less jobs for farmers and reduces food security. Women and children in particular require the nutrients in meat, and ranching is an ecosystem service critical to rural economies. And this is an image I got when I was touring with the Pampeanas earlier last week. It was a beautiful system. And here is my main elevator pitch for meat, okay? Grazing animals are unique protein upcyclers. They can take nutrient-poor food and make it into protein. That's magic. They can consume food we can't eat and turn it into the most nutritious food for humans on land we can't crop, providing critical ecosystem functions, supporting rural traditions and economies of rural Uruguay, and is the best use of the pampas. And that's it. So you can follow me. You can find my book. Hopefully will be in Spanish, maybe in about a year. I have also a film, A Sacred Cow, and I have my organization, the Global Food Justice Alliance, where I fight for the inclusion of meat and livestock in our food system. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Diana, por
Thank you, Diana, for the presentation. So now we will give the floor to questions from the audience, and then you can stay afterwards because we're going to have lamb chivitos. Lamb sandwiches.
En español lo hago para que entienda todo el mundo, sí, sí. ¿Cuándo va a estar pronta la traducción al español del Sacred Cow?
When are we going to have the translation of the Sacred Cow book into Spanish? Because it's a wonderful book and it's worth for all the producers to read it.
If you can read Korean or Finnish, it's already available. I hope in maybe 1 year.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. You didn't mention so much the cultural aspect of the production of beef or meat. Here in Uruguay, I don't have to mention the importance it has. I'm German, and in Germany, I can't imagine a landscape without cows, because it's part of our tradition. And in many extreme cases, I know some societies in Africa that their culture are especially based on livestock.
Yes, I see this all over the world. Oh, I'm just going to take that off. Even in England, people with more money are moving to the countryside because it's so bucolic. And they're complaining about the smell of the cows. So if we want healthy rural economies, we have to have livestock production.
Is there a movement, in addition to all the movements you are leading? Is there any global organization defending or promoting the value of meat with respect to the characteristics that were mentioned today? Like defending all the aspects of meat has?
I've only seen that come from industry, but because I am independent of industry, I feel that when I say something, it's a little more powerful because I'm more trusted by the public, because I believe this as a mother and as a dietitian and as somebody who's raised meat, and it's not like I'm profiting from the slaughter of animals, which is the perception when the meat industry comes forward with messages similar to mine. My organization is the only one that is doing this. But we were talking last night, I've been talking with people here about how there needs to be, there's many countries that need to be getting behind this and maybe organizing together. Meat is important to Italy, to Spain, to Brazil, Argentina. So hopefully we can band together and put aside the differences to push back, because the vegan movement is organized and very well funded.
Hola. Usted cuando
When you presented the substitutes of meat, you briefly mentioned lab meat or artificial meat or fake meat. You didn't mention plant-based meat, hamburger or meat. Why do you think this is a threat for the livestock industry, synthetic meat?
So I kind of group all of the alternate meats together. So we have the Beyond Meat, which is the plant-based burgers made from chemical monocropping. And then we have the lab meats, which are also chemical monocropping, then converted with very high energy processes into something that looks like meat. I think they're all equally ridiculous. Lab meat in particular is financially not going to come down in price enough to be a threat to the meat industry. I think the biggest threat is really that policymakers are being persuaded to encourage people to be more accepting of these foods, because most people actually don't want to be eating them, but they're hearing that it's better for them. They're hearing from their governments, they're hearing from the media. But even Beyond Meat is twice as expensive as organic grass-fed beef, which is the most expensive type of meat in the US. So I think it's more of a policy problem, but in stores I don't think it will be accepted.
Muchas gracias por...
Thank you for your presentation and congratulations for your work. I've been following you for a while. Following your answer to this last question, that the communication of the policies is key in this aspect, have you seen in local governments or in international institutions or state institutions, have you seen any type of voice against this narrative for the gas emissions or the health issues that maybe is a little bit against the consensus of meat, anti-meat?
can smell the meat.
Puedo.
Buenos.
Good morning. It's a pleasure, Diana. I couldn't be present at Pampianas. I'm a member of the group, but for weather conditions, I almost had to swim away from home. I can't hear. I'm the coordinator of the pastures, grasslands in Uruguay, and we encourage sustainable meat in 4 countries: Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina. And we have a great difficulty to make that meat so that the producer receives a little bit more, so that the chain gives value to that, to all the different systems that are aligned with the meat. What do you think we can do at the country level to promote this and to communicate this, the benefits of this meat better?
I had some ideas when I was meeting with the women of the Pampianas of perhaps coming up with a label or some kind of co-op where you're all together and branding the meat and your practices. I think women raising meat is an interesting angle as well, especially because most of the people who are at the stores buying the meat are women. So I see the same issue again when I was in England with the shepherds in the Lake District, because the land can't support as many animals there as in New Zealand or Montana. So their meat ends up being more expensive than the imported lamb. And so I encourage them to make a label, Lake District Meat, supporting the rural traditions and economies of England. So maybe there's something you can do with as a group.
For those of us who follow the newsletter of Sacred Cow, and it's been a pleasure to really listen to this presentation today. It's important to see that human health is important, animal health and environmental health. But when we see that, we are implicitly receiving a message that is really strong from the WHO, the World Animal Health, FAO, also UN Program for the Environment. They have put this included under a single umbrella that is health, but we are not just considering a single health. I would like to add this message to your message because it would be more powerful. A message where, for example, doctors or vets, we've been working on this for many years. It is the message of sustainability. The sustainable meat tables, round tables in Latin America have been working on these pillars, and we are working on making this message explicit.
Hacemos una
Thank you.
última pregunta y cerramos.
One last question and then we'll close.
Hemos hablado.
Diana, we've been talking this past days. A few years ago, INAC brought Frank Middlener, who is a friend of yours and also our friend, who is pushing back against this aspect to measure methane correctly for also the environmental health. Today you are here in contact with the producers, with the livestock sector. Tomorrow you are going to be present at the parliament. So the question about what the political system thinks is very important, because you have also worked with the political system. So tomorrow you will see this reality, and on Thursday you will meet the academy, the academia, because from the health point of view. Uruguay is the most livestock country, right? That is our coat of arms, actually. And what is your feeling? Because here you're going to feel that you are among friends, not only here in this exhibition, but in general. What is your feeling as a nutritionist when you go back to the United States, or when you are in Europe and you see that anti-meat reaction? What are your feelings?
I think people are really disconnected from. I think people are really disconnected from food production and from nature. And I think that one of the reasons your meat culture here in Uruguay is so strong is because many of you still have connections to the farm where meat is produced. And it is so important to the tradition of people in Uruguay. And I think in other countries, and the Netherlands in particular, Germany, where the anti-meat message is much stronger. I think people have really lost touch. There's more people living in cities, and they're forgetting that humans are animals too. We're part of nature. We're omnivores. And there is a species-appropriate diet for humans that must include meat. So I hope that Uruguay continues to be unapologetic about how beautiful your meat system is here and how important grazing animals are to the Pampas.
Muchas gracias. Antes de finalizar, quiero invitarlos el viernes que viene. Vamos a tener otro.
So before finishing, I would like to invite you to another conference that INAC will be holding on Friday called Food Boosts Growth. And we're going to have 4 women related to health and nutrition that will be debating about this. So we would like to invite you to come again on Friday. Thank you very much to all of you, to all of those who are following us on the streaming thing. And we'll be having a tasting now. Thank you very much.